hands and close your eyes. It's midnight, and you're listening to the Ghost Story Guys. Welcome to the Ghost Story Guys. I'm Brennan Storr.
I'm Paul Bestall.
This is the show where we talk about spooks, specters, and all the other things watching us from the shadows beyond the campfire. Some conversations only make sense after the sun has set, and this is most definitely one. Thanks for tuning in. This is episode number 206, and we're coming to you from that tiny mountain cabin you dream about, but can never quite reach. Paul Bestall, my friend, how you doing?
I am doing very well, very well. I'm basking in the glory of the Commanders winning a playoff game, Brennan, for the first time in 19 years. I crawled to bed at 4:15 a.m. on Monday to get up for work at 9 a.m. and I didn't care.
Those are the feats of a younger man, Paul Bestall. I'm very impressed.
I don't know how I managed it. I can't wait to do the same on Saturday night. I really, really, really can't. To hope we don't get hammered by Detroit, but there we are.
Can you at the very least sleep in after that one?
Well, yes. I'm planning to get as many chores as possible done in the next 24 hours. So, other than getting up to let Theo have a wee for a bit and then go back to sleep for another couple of hours, I think that's the only thing I've got planned till about 2:00 Sunday afternoon.
That sounds pretty all right to me.
But other than that, my friend, it's been a pretty mundane week in between the snow melting and the normality of life.
I very much understand. Yeah, I think the sole standout for my week was going on Saturday, so a week ago, just under a week ago, to go see Nosferatu in Toronto with some friends, and had a great time. It's a hell of a movie. I'm sure everyone who's into that kind of thing and is listening has seen it by now. But hell of a movie. I gotta say, Bill Skarsgård, man, that guy's got the juice.
Yes, he certainly has. There's something in that family's DNA, no doubt.
I tell you, it's not in mine is timing, because I feel like watching Nosferatu would have been much more appropriate for like a Haunting of Romania episode.
Yes.
Or something along those lines, and not what we have lined up, which is, of course, The Haunting of Poland. Now, if you were to tell 2004 Brennan this, he would not be able to point out the difference between the two. So I guess there is sort of a thematic connection, but it's mostly my inability with maps more than it is anything with the actual subject. So yes, on this episode, we're going to be exploring the hauntings of Poland. Luke has found a great little stable of stuff for us here, and we also have some folklore to tell as well, one of which does actually tie back into Romania. So we're going to pretend like I planned all this and not discovered it organically in the telling.
I'm excited.
Me too. But before we do that, we've got to thank our patrons.
This one's for the patrons.
Patrons, we could not do what we do without you. So thank you. Thank you, thank you. For real. Every single person who downloads the Ghost Story Guys, you help make us who we are. But patrons, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube subscribers are truly the ones who allow the show to continue. We couldn't do it without your support. And while we'd like to thank all of our subscribers, we would especially like to thank our latest ones. They are
Sharona Evans.
I have to find the list. Anime Diz.
Cassie Fury.
Stella Archuleta.
And Wolf TG42.
Again, thank you so much from the bottom of our terrible hearts. We appreciate every single one of you. And if you want to join the team, get bonus episodes, extra conversations between me and Paul, ad-free early release, and lots of other cool stuff. Click the link in the show notes or head to patreon.com/ghoststoryguys or sign up to Ghost Story Guys Premium via Apple Podcasts and YouTube. All right, Paul. Are you ready to go to, I was going to say go Polish. I don't think that's a thing. I don't know what I'm doing. I had a very strange morning, as we've discussed.
Yes, that's okay.
Either way, we're going to take a quick break and be right back with The Haunting of Poland.
A series of ghosts. As a child, I used to see ghosts every day at my house. It was natural to me. Nothing special, just black shadows walking around, showing themselves wherever they wanted to. This started to change when I was a teenager. At the age of 15, I faced a ghost for the first time. It was a normal, casual day. I was doing makeup in the toilet with the door to the hallway fully open. Suddenly I felt, and maybe by intuition, to look to the left through the open door. As quick as I looked, I turned back towards the mirror, and then I realised what I'd seen. It was too late when I looked there again. It had disappeared. The ghost had a shape of a 17-year-old boy. He looked like a concentrated shadow without contours, like he was fading at the edges. He stood still and looked at me for a reason that only he knew, and I can't remember his eyes. After this instance, I couldn't feel fear, just surprise. My second event happened on a boring evening, and I was sat in my room without an idea of what to do. I went down to the living room where my parents were having a conversation, and I sat on the sofa and listened to their funny talks. Suddenly, like the last time, I looked towards the hallway and then back to my parents. This happened once again when I realised that I'd seen something, and I started to jump happily upon the sofa. "I've just seen a ghost! I've seen a ghost!" I said to my parents while still jumping and clapping my hands. My mum straight away said, "Seriously? Tell me more." My dad, who was a hard-skinned guy, said, Yeah, just stop joking." I told him that this ghost looked like a 9-year-old boy. Just like his ghost friend from upstairs, he looked like a concentrated shadow. Once again, it just stood still and looked at me. Why do these ghosts have human postures and features, but no eyes? The next one I met was a bad one. I was 18 years old and had a boyfriend, and one day at his house, he told me that sometimes when he sat at his computer, he felt like something was staring at him, but when he turned back or checked to look, nobody was there. It was just his cat sitting on the bed and looking through the open door at the space between his room and the hallway. He wasn't a very pleasant person, and often he would go outside to smoke and not want me to come with him and stay in his bedroom. So I just stayed there and I laid on the bed with the cat on my chest. Suddenly, I was overcome with fear. A fear so strong that it became hard to breathe. I opened my eyes and saw that the cat was looking at the same spot as I was. I closed my eyes again and started to repeat to myself, "It can't harm me, it can't harm me, it can't harm me," and to simply let it go. The cat relaxed and put his head back on my chest and went to sleep. The funny thing is, at the moment where I was overcome with fear, I somehow knew that this feeling didn't belong to me, but something had put this fear inside me. My consciousness was untouched, and thanks to that, I was able to push it away. I needed to mention that this type of ghosts, in my experience, are never going to be stronger than humans. What makes them weaker? For me, it's simple. It's that we have a body that they don't have, and if you're strong enough to push them away, they'll never be able to hurt you. I encountered this spirit a second time during a sleepover at my ex's house. I couldn't fall asleep because I was being distracted by his constant gaming. I was trying so hard to fall asleep that I seemed to have fallen into some kind of trance. It felt like something between a dream and reality. In this deep darkness, I didn't feel my body, but my consciousness was fully awake and aware of my existence. Suddenly, from the wall on my right side, something began to appear. A white posture that started to bend down towards my body. At this moment, I opened my eyes with one thought in my head, which was a simple, "Wow." The ghost disappeared, seemingly unhappy about me noticing him. I didn't feed his spirit, so he didn't seem to stay attached to me, and he never showed himself again. After what happened that night, I had to have a conversation with my ex-partner's mum. She told me about her life, and that some time ago she became really into occultism. She was using tarot and the crystal balls for meditation and predicting the future. She was sat in the kitchen when this white figure appeared in front of her and, as with me, started to bend down towards her. This scared her so much that she threw everything away that had a connection with the occult and spirits. But it seemed that this thing stayed, hiding in the walls of their house and trying to poison the entire family's spirit. Another occasion, I was meditating in my room and I was trying to share my energy with the person who was in hospital. I meditated so long that once again I went into a trance, the same one as at my ex's house. It was only a few seconds, but that was all I needed to hear someone saying, "I know what you feel." This woke me up, full of questions, and these questions have yet to be answered. After this, my contact with ghosts began to be less frequent, and the next experience happened 3 years after that. Once again I was laid in my bed, drifting off to sleep, but once again my consciousness seemed to put me into a trance that seemed to send me a message from my ghost friends saying, "Listen." This woke me up immediately, questioning who I should be listening to. The ghosts? My family? Someone that I was hanging around with, or my friends? Myself? Or just my intuition? Now, I think back and think that I listened to the right thing. My intuition has always helped me to find my way.
Now, I recognize this as a younger person, but when they mentioned, like, it took me a minute because they said having a sleepover with their ex, and I thought, well, I know what those are called. It's not a sleepover. That's weird.
It depends.
Well, I suppose. Well, but then they mentioned the constant gaming, and I thought, well, either these are children or nothing of what popped up in my head is happening here. So,
Or he's a bro.
well, that could be too. That could be too.
I can't go to bed till I've defeated Groom Scroll Scrockalock.
That is the sound of the ghost tree guys having their finger on the pulse of modern gaming.
I am on it.
What was a game that that Musk pretended to be really good at, and then he did a stream recently, and he looked like an absolute dipshit?
I know of it, but I couldn't tell you the name because I don't play it.
I'd never heard of it either. To me, sadly, I think online gaming, I still think World of Warcraft and EverQuest. So this gives you an idea how old our nerddom is.
I've not even started one of my Christmas presents, which was Call of Duty Black Ops 6.
There are 6 of them now.
Apparently so.
Okay. Well, to sort of to reinforce my my gaming bona fides here, I guess we'll say, I played so much Spider-Man 2 before going back to Victoria for Christmas that my ring finger or my middle finger still kind of tingles when I press it against the body of the controller.
Isn't this how Tetsuo's the Iron Man starts?
What it is, and I'm not saying I'm hoping for it, but I wouldn't mind. We'll give it a try.
You'll end up like that woman in Superman 3.
Oh, well, as long as it's not, I don't end up like Richard Pryor in Superman 3.
Okay. Poor Richard.
Poor Richard. Or Nuclear Man in Superman. Anyways, back to the ghost story.
Nuclear Man. That's a dreadful film.
It truly is.
Even at 12, I thought it was shit.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember watching it. And it might have been my first encounter with disappointment. Oh, okay.
No, what was mine? Battle Beyond the Stars.
I've heard it. I've never seen it.
Yes, I went to the cinema like that, and I came out even at the age of 7 and said to I think I went with my grandfather, and I said, "That's just a really bad version of Star Wars, Granddad." And it was.
And your granddad thought, Christ, he's a nerd.
I don't think they knew what such things were back in those days.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Going back to the story, there was that statement, "I know what you feel," which kind of caught my ear. And there's something about it feels like something like a statement you would say when you're trying to convey a lot of information with not a lot of characters. Like if you maybe you can only, it's difficult for you to communicate.
Yep.
But you're trying to let the person know as much as possible about the situation. And it also got me thinking too, the idea that the spirits, they're appearing without eyes.
Yes, that is weird.
Yeah. And I mean, part of me just wonders, maybe you get to be a certain age post-death and you just like fucking with people. But I also wonder if maybe there's obviously the whole thing, like the eyes of the gateway to the soul, maybe there's something about the corporeal, like that part of the corporeal form that doesn't follow you into the afterlife, which is a terrifying thought because I'm reading a lot of Clive Barker and suddenly the idea of a bunch of eyeless angels seems all too real.
I mean, this is the thing. The interpretation is that she's meeting spirits. And I know we have a brief diversion into an origin story of the occult summoning them, which I'm not having. For me, I think once again, there's a naivety in presuming that whoever it is honest with their intentions. And often we've heard many a time in lots of different fields that often what they say and how they act is not their overriding aims. They may be playing the trickster.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. You can't, I don't think you can take what a spirit says. Well, we know that for a fact. You can't take what they say at face value.
Very true.
And I would know the spirit didn't know what I feel because he's not screaming all the time.
Mine are just tut a lot.
There he goes again.
Should you really be watching another episode of Very Scary People with Mark Wahlberg, Paul? Stop it. Sorry, Donnie Wahlberg. Go to bed, Paul.
Oh, wow. Speaking of Wahlbergs, I saw the preview for the new Mark Wahlberg movie, Flight Risk, when I went to go see the Bob Dylan movie the other night. And I don't know, that might be worth watching more than a serial killer documentary just because you get to watch someone murder their own career. Men in Black. I did a summer language program in Poland a few years ago. We stayed in a building that doubled as a college dorm and a hostel of sorts, but the floor I stayed on was entirely made up of students in the program. My program was 6 weeks long, and there was another batch of students that stayed there for, I believe, 4 weeks before we got there. In each suite, there were 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. There were 2 students in each bathroom, so 4 students in a suite total. One day, the girls who stayed in the other room of my suite got really freaked out. They said they were taking a nap and woke up to see 2 men in suits staring at them. The men said they were looking for an African priest who was supposed to be staying there, and after realizing he wasn't, they handed them Jehovah's Witness pamphlets. Now, that's all weird enough, but you needed a key to get into the suite, and the doors locked automatically behind you. A few days later, I was taking a nap. I'm a very deep sleeper, but I guess I woke up from the feeling of being watched. Lo and behold, I saw 2 men in suits, staring at me. They matched the description of the men my suite mates saw. They then told me they were looking for an African priest who was supposed to be staying there, and handed me a Jehovah's Witness pamphlet. I saw the men, talked to them with only a few feet between us. They appeared to be flesh and blood. For some reason, I never asked them about what had happened to my suite mates a few days prior, and I still have no idea what to make of this. And so, before we jump into the story itself, it occurred to me we didn't talk in the intro a little about like exactly where Poland is. And obviously, you've been there, so you know Poland. I know Poland, but some of our listeners may not totally know where Poland is and kind of what it is. So, the basic rundown, folks, is that Poland extends from the Baltic Sea in the north of basically in Eastern Europe, to the Carpathian Mountains in the south. It's bordered by Lithuania and Russia to the northeast, Belarus and Ukraine in the east. And then you've got Germany to the west. So that'll kind of, if you know roughly where Germany is, that'll kind of help orient you. If you don't, I just said a lot of shit that doesn't matter. But they've got a population of about 38 million, which I thought was interesting. I didn't know what I expected. But that's roughly the population of Canada in an area much, much smaller than Canada. In fact, it is actually smaller in total area than New Mexico. I think New Mexico is 314,000 square kilometers, and Poland is, I think, 312.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of other history that I think we need to preload people with up front, although I desperately need them to know that they had a king called Ladislav the Short.
Yes, they did like their nicknames in Europe in the medieval times.
Rough medieval Europe in my high school.
We had here Ethelred the Unready.
Okay.
Who was, I think, about 860 AD. And he was his name. He just wasn't prepared for anything. He was shit. Shit King.
Shit King. Wow. So now I have to know, then this is more your department than mine. Do they get the names while they're regents, or does this come up afterwards? Because I feel like if you like that guy, he doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. I feel like the king might have some remedies to use upon you there.
Yeah, I suspect that these are terms that were given them after they'd gone. Because back in those days, if you went around saying that king, he's a bit shit, you'd very quickly find yourself getting your head chopped off, I would imagine.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, this must be a post facto thing, because again, it's a very, very ballsy thing to do. There's Ethelred the Unready. He doesn't know what the fuck he's doing, does he? Look at him. Look at him. What kind of fucking name is that, too, huh?
We've lost Hull. The Vikings have taken it. And he's still getting his bloody socks on. Come on, Ethelred.
Yeah, and Ethelred's just like Larry David, just yelling at everyone, but not actually doing anything.
Shut up, I'm coming.
Yeah, exactly.
in Latin.
Yeah, naturally, yeah. Going to the story, though, this is what I find really interesting, because it's simple, but it's baffling. Because you've got two different groups of people seeing the same thing in a different place in a locked room.
Well, this is often the thing about Men in Black stories. Sometimes they seem to appear from nowhere, and sometimes they seem to like walk out of the door onto the street and people follow them and they're nowhere to be seen.
Oh, interesting. I didn't realize that was part of the lore.
Yeah, there's lots of weird things. There's lots of them. I'm sure I've mentioned it before. I like the ones that break down or don't know how to do normal things and just act weird.
Like the ones who they seem to like sweat, or they seem like weirdly ill-prepared for the conditions.
Yeah. I remember one guy turned up at a UFO witness's house and said, "This will only take 45 minutes. And as soon as he got to 45 minutes, he went, "Thank you very much," got up and went.
Are we sure that's not just an autistic guy?
Who knows? This is the thing.
Because if I tell someone this is going to take 45 minutes, I will feel the hand of God crushing my spine out of fear unless I finish it in 45 minutes.
Yeah, there's been one who just constantly drank water, but drank it really oddly, like gulped it, like one who couldn't understand what a table was and just stood there, like, what do I do? What do I do? There was one that was sat on a settee, one of the rare occasions where it was a man and a woman, and he seemed to break down. He couldn't work, and his arms and his legs didn't work properly, and they had to help him back up off the couch, and he sort of started walking funny, like the Tin Man in The Wizard of Oz.
Had he recently started a horror fiction podcast?
Had he stayed up till 5 a.m. watching American football, way beyond his years of recovery.
Ladies and gentlemen, our new co-host, Men in Black guy.
Hello.
The third ghost story guy. He is also broken in fundamental ways.
You saw a weather balloon.
All right. There's good old Man in Black with the weather balloon report. That'd be great. Have a segment just have him review a different paranormal phenomenon and have him go, "It's a weather balloon." Yeah, and have that same unnerving 10,000 mile stare. 100%. Yep, I'm all here for it. Men in Black. Would you like to be on the show? Contact Paul in his bedroom at 3 a.m.
They're not coming around here again.
I'm always reminded whenever I read a Men in Black story, I'm reminded of the first one I ever read, and I didn't realize I was reading it at the time. Or pardon me, I didn't realize that it was a Men in Black story, but in Malcolm X's autobiography that he wrote with Alex Haley, he mentioned seeing a man in black. Although he doesn't call it as such. He doesn't have the language for it, but he was in prison. And on the night when he decided, I think it was the night he decided to convert to Islam, when he became Malcolm X and dropped his previous name, he woke up to a man in a suit, as I recall, sitting next to his bed and watching him. And he was only there briefly and then he was gone. But he was certain, he felt that this was an indication that, like he had made the right choice. But I thought it was interesting that it's essentially a Men in Black visitation in sometime in, I want to say, the late 50s.
Intriguing. I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, again, I'm pretty sure it's in the Alex Haley version of his biography. Like I read the longer one that Manning Marable put out about 10 years ago, or maybe, about 10 years ago. And I don't know if it mentions it. I can't remember. It's quite a dense book. But again, for someone who clearly did not know anything about MIB lore, I thought it was fascinating that it popped up in the story. Absolutely.
It's always good when you have pretty sort of dry or political characters who occasionally mention randomly weird events.
Yeah, I mean, since we do have some politicians who are probably about to start mentioning random weird events, I'd like to say I'd prefer if they were not in office when they did it.
Well, you know, these lasers in the sky.
Oh. Oh. I knew I was too online when I mentioned those lasers to a friend of mine. I mentioned hiding under the desk from those lasers, and she just said, "What?" Never mind. Actually, that reminds me, just before we move on to the next story, there was a great moment when I was back in Victoria. Nick and I were going downtown to see a movie, and we passed a Cybertruck parked on the curb. And she looked at it and said, "What the fuck is that?" I said, "Oh, it's a Cybertruck." "A fucking what?" A Cybertruck. What? And she had no idea. She was not aware that Cybertrucks existed. She was not aware of the whole discourse around them being garbage and them being, like male birth control, all these kinds of things. She just looked at this thing and thought, that looks like hot garbage without any of the baggage. And I love that for her, that she is separated enough from the internet. She just does not know these things. I truly envy her, Paul.
Yes. I didn't think it would take much. Well, or rather, I didn't think I'd ever see a car uglier than a Fiat Cinquecento, or whatever they're called, which essentially looks like some kind of character out of Thomas the Tank Engine that's been squashed in a vice and turned into a car.
It does too. I'm looking at it right now.
They are some of the ugliest cars I've ever seen in my life, and I find it incredible that a company like Fiat could produce such an ugly car.
It looks like the kind of toaster you buy from like Temu because you're opening up your first apartment. You get your first place on your own, and then it burns your house down. That's what the Cinquecento looks like, and fittingly produced in Poland. So we are, to all our critics who say you guys are never on topic, we could not be more on topic.
I must have surreptitiously learnt that in the past, and it's just eked out of my strange brain.
Your big, beautiful, strange brain.
Why, thank you. The wardrobe. Hello, everyone. This happened to me 2 nights ago, but the story goes back 2 months. Me and my wife live in my father's house, which is quite big. We live upstairs and my dad and stepmom live downstairs. And my dad loves antiques. Sometimes we think he might have some kind of addiction, but he keeps saying to us that it's a good investment. My dad recently bought a wardrobe from an antique store. It was pretty old, and my dad said it was made in the 1850s. It looked really nice and well preserved, but I didn't think much about it because he buys that many things that you lose count. After he bought it and fetched it home, though, things started to go weird. I began to suffer from sleepless nights. I'd wake up about 1 a.m. and just couldn't fall back asleep. I'd go down to the kitchen to have a cigarette, and on this particular occasion I heard footsteps, but very quiet. I thought it might have been my grandmother, who had begun to live with us after breaking her legs 4 months previously, and the doctor said she shouldn't walk a lot due to the complications. Her bones were quite weak due to some childhood disease. I went to check, but it wasn't her. A couple of days later, my cousin came over, and we were hanging out and watching TV. For the previous 2 weeks, I'd been seeing something in the corner of my eye, but I really wasn't sure what it was. This only seemed to occur in the living room and in the same part of the room. I kept looking there every few minutes. I thought perhaps it was a mouse or something, but I never saw anything. I was telling my cousin about everything that had been going on when I asked him a question. Have you seen things from the corner of your eye, and when you turn to look, there's nothing there? He said, Rarely, but there is something by your television. I don't know what it is, but I keep seeing it there. Well, that kind of freaked me out, but at the same time that gave me some proof that there was something going on in my house. However, the scariest thing happened to me 2 days ago. I woke up around midnight to go to the train station and pick up my father. I didn't want to go alone, so my wife drove with me. We dropped him off at the house and we were driving back home. As we got out of the car and went into the house, I entered it first because my wife was busy looking for something in the car. I took off my shoes and started to make my way through the hall, when all of a sudden, this wardrobe started shaking. Not long, but maybe for about 5 seconds. I was shocked. I thought perhaps it was because I'm a pretty big boy, Maybe I caused it to vibrate as I walked past. I checked this by walking by the side of it with hard steps and nothing happened. I remember carrying that wardrobe into the house with my father, and it weighed a lot because it was made of oak. I didn't tell my wife about this incident because she really doesn't like to talk about the paranormal.
The walk. My friends and I used to like to take long walks at night. Almost every night we'd go out into the city and explore parks big and small, or the streets of the city. One January night, it was extremely foggy, and we found ourselves in this very creepy park. We kept walking in the fog, making jokes and noticing strange marks on the ground, which seemed to be made by something. Something weird, like a dog being dragged, but we made no note of it. I did take a picture, though. A while later, I spot something off on the path. It looked like a signpost, and decided to go for it. After further exploration, it turned out to be a tree with a lamppost right next to it, which is why it seemed so distinctive. It wasn't a very impressive or creepy tree. It just looked like your run-of-the-mill, average young tree. However, it seemed to call to me, sort of. It felt sad, like I needed to be there for it and comfort it. My friends were calling to me, but I wasn't responding. All that mattered was me being there for this sad tree. After another 30 seconds, looking at my friends' scared faces, we decided to go. It wasn't easy leaving that tree alone. I felt really sad, like I was abandoning it. But we had to go home at some point. This was my first encounter with the tree. Nothing happened for some time. I showed some other friends the tree during daytime and felt nothing. I later tried to take the girl I was dating at the time to the tree, also during the day, but I couldn't find it. We looked for an hour, and I felt that the tree did not want to be found that day. It was angry and disappointed. Some months later, one of my friends from the first encounter and I decided to go again, at night, but this time taking our very spiritual friend with us, who always says she has vibrations more in tune with supernatural entities. Just to note that this friend, not the spiritual one, never has any gut feelings, especially like that danger feeling you get sometimes. Anyway, we went to the tree, and I felt coldness from it. It was not happy. It would not harm us, but it would not protect us if something did try to harm us. We heard a rustling sound from the path to the right of the tree, probably an animal or something, but then we all felt it at the same time from the path on the left. Something was coming for us. It was something sinister. The path was completely dark. My non-spiritual friend asked, "Do you guys feel that?" I replied, "Yep, something's coming." And the spiritual friend said, yes, let's leave now. And we all hightailed it out of there. The spiritual friend said we shouldn't go back to the tree, and that it feels like some kind of portal is there, or a connection to something or somewhere supernatural. The last encounter with the tree, we decided to go, the original 3 people from the first encounter, but this time taking my now girlfriend, whose mother had prophetic dreams, and was also starting to have prophetic dreams of her own. We got there, and the tree felt silent, like it wasn't there anymore. But the place itself felt odd too. My girlfriend felt unsafe, and we left. She also said that it felt like a portal, and advised me never to go back and never mess with these things, as they shouldn't be messed with, and that it's possible that the tree, or whatever entity is in or around the tree, is trying to lure me into helping it. I have not been back since. Before we move forward with another story, I wanted to share this little folklore break. We got 2 of these mixed in here. This one is actually from a Luke-lore episode. Since Luke did such a great job of finding us stories for this one, I thought it would be cool to share something from his show. And the episode is called Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Baba Yaga. That is from 2021, I believe. And it is about the character from Polish folklore called Lady Midday, which sounds like an awesome southern rock band name. So this is taken directly from Luke's script. Luke says, when workers were out on the hottest days, there was a worrying chance a spectral woman in white may be stalking the edges of the fields looking for prey. Sometimes they are not seen, only felt. Other times an unnatural dust cloud will mark where Polunnica is roaming. Should she catch an unwary worker who didn't pay attention to the warning signs and promptly get indoors, they will be touched by this sun-loving spectre, a touch that can bestow many terrible gifts. Muscles cramping with crippling pain, collapsing from exhaustion, even being consumed by madness. It's best not to be touched by the noon wraith at all than risk it. And this one is a far-reaching tale. From Poland and the Eastern Slavic countries all the way west across various Germanic cultures, you're more likely to find the name Mittagsfrau. If you're looking at folklore purely through the lens of parable, Poludnica appears to be a cautionary tale about the dangers of working under the heat of high noon. The Lady in White being an anthropomorphization of heat stroke that people who toiled under the hot sun in centuries past told stories about to get a better grasp of the physical. If you look at Lady Midday through a more literal interpretation, the dust clouds sweeping down onto the farmlands heralding a merciless wraith, they are instead a terrifying entity that proves not even the bright light of high noonday can be a refuge from the supernatural. Which is, what's the opposite of comforting? Luke, you're absolutely right. That is all the way bad. Though I do love things that can scare me in the daytime. I think that's something, I know it's hard to do. And I think I've only seen 2 horror films that have really managed to spook me in the daytime off the top of my head. There's the first Insidious movie, when she walks back into her house and she sees a little kid dancing to Tiptoe Through the Tulips in her living room. And then there's The Host, when the creature, in the very beginning, when the creature starts tearing through the picnic at the beach. That freaked me out as well. But I can't think of another daytime horror film. Can you?
That's a good question.
I mean, I like Danny Boyle's Sunshine, but I don't think it's scary.
No. I mean, well, talking to Danny Boyle, there's a lot of scary shit goes on in the day in 28 Days Later.
And actually 28 Weeks Later as well.
Yeah, zombie films, they're always scary in the day.
There we go. Yes.
Day of the Dead,
actually,
Dawn of the Dead.
Yep. Great examples. Funny enough, I sent you that message the other day. I asked if you had heard, because we had talked about how good the 28 Years Later trailer was.
Yes. And
I had asked if you had heard the music from that trailer on its own. Because the trailer, if you haven't seen it, folks, it's scary as shit. And a lot of that is owing, some strong imagery, but it's also owing to the terrifying, almost numbers station-like audio they play underneath it. And it turned out to be a reading of Rudyard Kipling's poem Boots. It was recorded in 1915. And if you listen to the whole thing, it's on YouTube. Look up Rudyard Kipling's Boots, 1915. You'll find it. It is fucking terrifying. I listened to that on my way to the car in the middle of the day, and I got chills, full body chills.
Yes, Kipling is one of Britain's most problematic authors and poets.
You don't say.
Shall we say? I mean, here's the guy that gave us both The Jungle Book and Rikki Tikki Taru and numerous poems, but also embraced the empire and racial segregation and the like.
Yep. We're not going to try and parse that here, but we will say that recording of that poem is fucking scary.
Yes. I mean, regardless of his political leanings, and let's be fair, most people of that class and situation believed that what they thought was correct at that time. Kipling was an incredibly skilled and powerful writer on a variety of levels.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's sort of, I was kidding, but not. It's hard to tease those things apart because you have to evaluate certain history in the light of the period when it happened. And you can't just dismiss the quality of someone's work. Although depending on what they've gotten up to, as news has recently showed us, you can try. I assume you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, sadly.
Yeah, very disappointing.
Yes. Well, here we are with 16 days in and already people are bereft of one of their literary heroes.
And David Lynch died, which I'm even sadder about.
Yes. We've lost a derailed comic genius this week as well here in the UK, Tony Slattery.
Oh, what happened to him?
He died of a heart attack on Sunday. He did a very powerful documentary right at the beginning of the pandemic, quite ironically, called What's Wrong with Tony Slattery? And basically the BBC followed him around going to his psychiatrist and going through everything and sharing his trauma and everything. And it was hard.
Oh, really?
It was hard viewing, watching him open up and break down and open up and break down. Yeah, tough. But he wanted to do it. He wanted people to see the real him and understand why he'd gone the way he had, and I thought that was very brave of him.
Absolutely, yeah. That is not an easy thing to do, especially when you're famous at that level. You know, it's a little easier to bare our souls at the level you and I operate at. But when you get that big, man, people are looking to weaponize anything they can against you.
Yeah. Well, it was one of those things. I remember the year before he'd kind of risen above the parapet for the first time in about 15 years, and the interview started. He did an interview in The Guardian. The Hadley Freeman, who writes for The Guardian, who's an exceptional journalist. And the article was headlined, "I had a lovely time until I went mad."
Fair.
And it was that. And partway through the interview, she said, "So why are you doing this?" And he said, "Oh, I just want people to know I'm not dead." Which really made me laugh.
Quickly taking back to the folklore stuff, folks, if you want to read more about Slavic folklore, we have a little bit more left in the episode. But again, we're always up against that balance of stories and lore. But there is a book. Now, you have to be able to read Polish to get much out of it, as apart from the illustrations. But everywhere I looked, this is the book people talked about if you wanted to learn more about Polish folklore and cryptids and creatures. And it's called Bestiarius Słowiański. It translates to The Slavic Bestiary by Witold Bargas and Paul Zich. Now, again, you can buy it. There is no translation available, so far as I know. But if you speak Polish, well, you don't care anyways. You're set. And if you don't, I think there's still some cool photos in there. So again, that's I'll write it in the show notes, because saying it out loud again, I'm just going to choke on my own tongue.
I'll get one of my lovely Polish colleagues at work to read it to me.
There we go. If you also want Paul's lovely Polish colleague to read it to you, send us an email, ghoststoryguys@gmail.com.
The Forest Giant. A couple of years ago in 9th grade, our class went to a lake near Poland for 6 days. It was in a big forest area 2 hours away from the next town, and the only thing around us was a huge cornfield, the lake, and a camping ground. Luckily for us, we'd been here before, and so we knew the people who owned and rented the lake house. So we got to stay there, even though it's only usually rented to younger students on class trips. What makes this story really cheesy is that third day was actually Halloween. We did a night tour with a guide, but nothing scary happened, though I did get to hold my crush's hand, which was nice. So 2 days later, half the class decided that, hey, we've already got flashlights with us. Why don't we go on our own ghost tour to the part of the forest we didn't go through during the proper tour? This was the part that if you followed the lake downwards, there was a path that went right around it. Opposite to this was the entrance to the huge cornfield that none of us had really paid any attention to because, high grass, bugs. My friend forgot her flashlight in her room, so whilst our group had already started, I waited for her outside in the dark, and to be fair, I was scared shitless. My poor ass didn't have a flashlight, and I wasn't about to spend the little money I'd taken on the class trip to never use it again. I told myself that this was okay, as because this wasn't some cheesy horror movie, and I could still see the group ahead of us, so none of them could sneak up on me and play a prank. I waited still, and next to me, coming from towards the lake, I heard something moving. I could hear it slowly creeping closer, but I couldn't see anything. I brushed it off as perhaps the cat that belonged to the janitor of the house we were staying at, though a second after I saw the cat, it was on the other side of the street. Trying not to freak out, I turned once again to where the noise was coming from and stared it down. Whatever this was, I was ready for the jump scare, because it certainly couldn't be anything bad anyway. But before the noise got too close to me, I heard my friends calling, and the noise suddenly stopped. I decided not to tell her, because I didn't think she'd believe me anyway. So we set off down the path, and what I should mention is that on each side of it were thick forest. On the right was the lake, but you could hardly see this through how thick the foliage was. So we then carried on walking down this creepy road, and I'd got the worst feeling in my stomach, like I was being watched, and it began to make me feel like I was panicking. I asked my friend over and over again to hand me the flashlight so I could keep checking behind us, but she refused because she thought I would run away with it or do something to scare her when we reached the entrance to the forest bit where our friends were. Finally, she let me take the flashlight and look behind us. Now, this flashlight was an expensive one, so it was super bright and far-reaching. And to be fair, you should probably not shine it towards the sky because it could blind a pilot. Behind us, I saw a huge black shadow that was just standing there and not moving at all. At least 2.5 meters tall and incredibly lanky. It didn't seem to be wearing any clothes, or maybe if it were, they must have been really tight, because there was nothing resembling clothes on its silhouette. There were no facial features, hair, or anything, and even though we were actively shining a light on it, it still stayed completely black. Seeing this, we were mortified, and were frozen to the spot. But luckily our friends had come running back from the forest, and the thing disappeared. Our friends were going on and on about finding this abandoned shack with an old ghost lady and all this other nonsense, which was obviously a prank which they led us towards. At this point, me and my friend both decided not to say anything about what we saw because we didn't think they'd believe us. One of the girls decided to remind us to be careful of the wolves that lived in the forest. And that's when I said, "No, I'm not having this," and I turned around. If there's one thing I'm not going to fuck with, it's wolves in the dark when nobody can hear us scream. Fuck that. They all just kind of followed, realising that the prank didn't seem to work and hadn't scared us, and it was getting late, and we were all beginning to be bored. We got out of the forest and looked at the cornfield from across the path, and didn't see anything unusual, just the usual tall grass and corn. There was nothing in the field. It didn't even have a scarecrow. And the farmer, whoever owned it, lived nowhere close, so it was just this field. When we started walking up the path back towards the house we were staying in, the bad feeling overcame me once again, and so I looked towards the crop field, and there it was again, this black, inhumanly lanky figure. However, this one seemed much taller than the one we'd previously seen, and once again was unmoving, not breathing, no hair blowing in the wind. Nothing. No silhouette of clothes. However, this time, everyone else saw it. They all stopped in their tracks and began to freak out. We then heard something running towards us from the forest behind us. Eventually, one of us broke out of this trance and set off running towards the house, with the others following behind. However, I stayed where I was. I kept shining the light on the figure, trying to come up with some kind of explanation as to what it was. I wanted to go up to see what was happening and see if it would react to me, but the running behind me got louder and louder. Eventually I remembered the message about the wolves from earlier on, and that's when I took tail and began to run after the others. When I reached the house, the others were all staring behind me, and this time I looked back, and both of the figures were where I was standing, unmoving. We got into the house and told the others that hadn't come on the walk, and noted that everybody was still in here, so nobody could have been playing a prank. We considered whether or not it could have been one of the camping people that had set up some kind of scare for us, but they were staying on the other side of the lake, and most of them were old people, so I doubt that they would be up for pulling a prank on us, and even if they had, we'd have seen their hair or clothes or face when we used the torches to shine on the figures. We would have seen them breathing or the light swaying, so nobody can stand completely still like they were, and they couldn't have been that tall. Even if they were cardboard cutouts or similar, surely we would have noticed with the lights. But the things were completely black. So black they were like a void that the light did nothing to, but lighten the place around the figures. I seriously believe that these things were shadow people and not a prank, and it still terrifies me to think of going back to that place by the lake.
So this was one that originally it sounded a little creepypasta.
Mm.
You know, like it was so vague that I thought, well, it's a great story, and I love shadow people, especially in the woods. But, well, not personally seeing them, but hearing what other people have in that issue.
Yep.
But then I did some digging, and I actually think I found the camp they were talking about. So the camp they were talking about is, I'm pretty sure, it's called Camp Kirkwitz, or sorry, the camp is called Dulo. It's on the Dulowitzer Sea, and which is, of course, it's a lake, but it's right on the border between Poland and Germany, which is why I thought we'll include it here. Because they mentioned the nearest station being Kirkwitz, and as I say, that is right at the border, and Dulowitzer Lake is, again, right there. And what's interesting is it actually has, if you look at it on the map, like if you see on Google Street View, because again, when they were talking about going down the street, my inner kind of skeptic went, well, what street? You're supposed to be in the country. But there are paved country lanes around there. And it also has some legends, which I really love, because it's a legend of a fisherman being slapped, which is just very much my shit. So supposedly, a man wanted to go fishing and crabbing in the Dulowitzer Lake at night. When the clock struck 12 o'clock, the fishing rod tugged, and when he pulled it out, he was slapped from behind. He threw the rod down and ran away, but he kept getting slapped until he was out of the heath. And supposedly the Hussites, which I'm not familiar with. Are you familiar with the Hussites, Paul?
Yes, I'm aware of them and their marauding ways from the mid-millennia.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So according to local legend, around the 15th century, the Hussites passed through and left some treasure in the lake. There actually has been talk off and on of draining the lake to get at the treasure, even though no one really knows for sure the fucking treasure's down there. And apparently, again, according to a legend, and this is one I translated from German, the legend says that they actually tried once. The town gathered around and the plan was to drain the lake, and something invisible slapped all of them. So I just love that there's this like old Italian grandma just going around giving everyone a whop on the ear going, what are you doing? No, stop it. Stop being stupid.
It's probably Baba Yaga.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Yeah. She is not having this. You're not draining this lake, you idiots.
Yeah. There's lots of lakes in Europe that are supposed to have got treasure in it. I know there's one I'm trying to think where it is. If it's in Switzerland, it might be in the Alps. And there was a lot of legend about the fact that it was full of plundered Nazi gold. And nobody believed anybody. And then a few years ago, somebody dove in it and they began to find all these German armaments that had been dumped in the lake.
Oh, shit.
And loads of cases. But for some reason, they can't seem to quite get there, or they didn't have the permission to get in there as much as they wanted to. But they began to think there might be something to this, because there's all these cannons and clothing and things like tents and jeeps and all sorts that had just been dumped into this lake when they were retreating.
Interesting. I mean, part of me thinks, well, time to go scuba diving. But then I also imagine the enthusiasm that might be met with when I brought up a bunch of gold bars with swastikas on them.
Well, the good thing about gold is you can melt it down and get rid of those horrible marks.
Yeah, because in my one-bedroom apartment, I have room I can smelt things. Just put it out on the balcony. I'd just be walking in there with like, it's a symbol of good luck. It's cool.
Why not?
The shaved head, that'll make me very popular. Actually, around here it might. The Headless Man. This incident happened almost exactly 6 years ago. I spent part of the summer with my relatives in the UK, and in August I flew back to Poland. When I reached my parents' home, I was dog-tired after a night spent in planes and on the airport in between flights, and a half day in the car. I didn't sleep much during that, as you can imagine. Then, at home, I had to unpack and do some stuff. So when the night came, I was exhausted and seriously needed some sleep. So I went to bed. My room was a big, spacious room upstairs. To get there from the stair landing, I had to pass through the other, much smaller room with one window, opposite to the door leading to my bedroom. I could see that window from my bed, actually, and I usually kept the door between the rooms open, as I never really felt safe in that bedroom. That night, I fell asleep very fast, and I slept like a stone with no dreams whatsoever. But there was no rest for me. I woke up suddenly, my heart pounding, and immediately noticed that there was someone in the smaller room, clearly visible in the dim light coming from the window nearby. It was a tall man in the old-fashioned dark suit and white shirt. The most horrible thing was he didn't have any visible head on his broad shoulders. It might sound stupid, or like a story written by someone with not much imagination, but where his head should be, there was only a mass of something like stiff, grayish fabric, vertically creased and covering his entire head and neck, if there was any, that is. I was scared out of my mind. I started screaming. I screamed so loudly I had a sore throat for the next few days. I felt like this entity was not Casper, the friendly ghost. It was evil. Fearing that it might come into my room, blocking entirely my way out and thinking I would go insane if it touched me, I decided to use my only chance of escape. I sprang out of bed, ran out of the bedroom and into the smaller room, and dived in that space between the entity and the old wardrobe, standing next to the wall on my left. I was actually doing that with my eyes closed. I would not dare run anywhere near to that thing. Miraculously, I managed to not smash myself into anything, and I made it to the stairs. But when I was running through where the entity stood, I swear I touched something. It was cold, smooth, soft, and a little bit sticky, a bit like fur covered with cobwebs. Then I flew downstairs, nearly falling down the steps in the process, and waking up my dad, a skeptic, who does not believe in paranormal. He even denies the things we witnessed together. I spent the rest of the night on the couch, and the next day I went to investigate. Believe me, I was scared when I was entering that room, even in full daylight. I examined everything carefully, looking for anything I could touch accidentally, while fleeing from there the night before. Nothing. The wardrobe was closed tightly, no clothes were sticking out. The place where the apparition had been standing was completely empty, no cobwebs on the wall, and nothing fur-like around. To this day, I don't know what I saw or what I touched that night. My parents' house is almost a century old. I don't know about any deaths happening there, but there were many paranormal occurrences in my bedroom and in the other parts of the house. Mostly noises, knocks, bangs, footsteps on the stairs. One time, my parents and I were sitting in the living room downstairs. My sister was upstairs in the bedroom. We heard someone walking down the stairs through the hallway, then the bathroom door opening and closing. We assumed it was my sis, and imagine our surprise when she really got downstairs a moment later. The doors would open and close by itself. There was a rattling, like someone was pulling the door violently. And once, a voice even whispered my name. And Paul, I gotta say, I love that we have got not one, but two douchebag dads on this episode.
It's been a while.
It has. Welcome home. Mission accomplished. The banner unfurls. Douchebag dad is home. We did it. Oh, you saw a bandage man in your room, eh? That sounds like lady trouble to me.
I mean, I always find, like it says in this, how when you see things at the same time and it's clearly weird and they go, no, it didn't. Is it fear? I think it is, really, because often, speaking from personal experience and family members who saw or experienced strange things, they would mention it once and then just never, ever talk about it again. As though mentioning it would either cause it to come back or it would give it credence. And I don't understand that kind of refusal to engage with strangeness.
I almost wonder if this is sort of like, if this points to like a really hard-coded kind of superstition in people. Even people I've noticed who are skeptical and don't necessarily believe these things, sometimes there are certain things they just don't like saying. And as you know, I used to listen to a lot of atheist comedy podcasts, and even those guys who were pretty dogmatic, they would sometimes catch themselves saying, oh man, don't say that. And then they'd stop and go, why? It doesn't matter. But I do wonder if we have this built-in suspicion. And honestly, it takes me way back to things like the old folkloric notions of don't say their names, or they'll hear you.
Yeah.
Maybe again, this is just like the whole, like the distrusting, the whole like count the fingers thing, right? We just have this innate distrust of, and the uncanny valley, right? We have this innate distrust of things which look almost normal, but we know aren't. And I wonder if it all comes from the same place. We don't want to say the thing because what if it comes back? We want to count the fingers because what if it's not who we think it is?
Yeah. It's almost as if mentioning it gives it validity.
I mean, that could be too. Yeah. I mean, certainly I've heard other people talk about other trauma and say, well, if I don't talk about it, it's not real.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Ignorance is bliss, as the saying goes.
I keep hoping for that bliss, Paul. I keep hoping for it.
Don't work, mate. So it'll eventually jump up and bite you on the ass, whatever it is.
Damn it.
Sorry.
Always a bridesmaid, never a bride. There were two other things I wanted to touch on, one of which is actually from the previous story, the forest giant. I just forgot to bring it up. Why do we sell products, consumer level products, that can interfere with commercial aviation? There should not be, there is no need for a human being to have a flashlight that could signal Dr. Manhattan on Mars. It is not necessary. Like, what this flashlight could blind a pilot. Why do we have those? Why does anyone have those? I don't understand.
Well, these are the questions that I often sometimes wonder. It's like, why do they sell cars that can go above the speed limit?
Yep. Why do they sell those goddamn headlights?
Well, all cars in Europe have all begun to move to LED headlights. So you haven't got a choice here. You either buy an old car or you get a new one with the skin melting brightness.
That's what I mean, though. Why? Surely there's a middle ground here, because I just don't understand why. Every time I get in my car at night, because my car is quite low to the ground, and I get a truck behind me, it's just like, I imagine driving into the sun.
Yeah.
You just hope, well, I hope there's no one in front of me, because otherwise I'm going to get very intimate with their car very quickly, because I can't see shit.
Dim your headlights, you bastard!
One of our exactly. One of our listeners a while back, she posted this thing on Instagram. It was like about going back, like, who do you kill if you're going back in time? And you got people like Hitler and Stalin, and then this guy just got a piece of paper. I think it was like a piece of paper with the guy who invented LED headlights.
I'm on board.
Yep. Hey, we can crowdfund this time machine.
That's probably the real reason Terminator starts, isn't it? LED headlights. That's where it
makes perfect sense to me.
I mean, it's one of those, like I say, I've always struggled with that. I remember somebody saying, "Oh, well, our speed limit isn't the same as other countries." And I went, "Well, I don't care. I'm not driving in another country, am I?"
Yeah. I tell you, man, if they can give me a fucking edited version of Den of Thieves 2, and I live 2 hours from the U.S. border, they can figure out how to put a limiter on cars sold in other countries. It's actually a really fun movie. I like the first Den of Thieves. In fact, we have a really funny comment from someone on the next Talk Spooky about that. But short version is, I went to go see this movie. I had fun with it. But then I was reading a review, and the reviewer mentions a scene where Gerard Butler and O'Shea Jackson Jr.'s character go have shawarma together. Yeah. And I thought I had a stroke. It's not in there. It was not in the version I saw. I thought, did the author watch a different fucking movie? Or did they really like the shawarma scene from the Avengers and they're trying to retcon it into every movie? And I know apparently the version we got here in Canada is about like 14 minutes shorter or something.
How strange. Mind you, it happens like that sometimes. I remember when I rewatched Upgrade after about 2 years after seeing it, and I'd completely forgotten the last 5 minutes, which is probably the most crucial part of the film. And I don't know what version I'd built in my head, but when I watched it again, I was like, I don't remember any of this happening.
So what do you remember from the last 5 minutes?
I just remember him finding out that it's the chip that's been behind it all, and some people die, and that was it. And then I realised when I watched it again, everybody dies, and he just makes he sets his guy the brain to make this guy think that he's back and his wife's miraculously come back alive and he's happy dancing through them fields. And in reality, he's off to like take over the world.
Oh yeah, that's how I remember it. Yeah, he Haruki Murakami is the guy right up in his own head and fucks off to take over the world.
What the fuck was that noise?
So I was waving my hand around and I hit my cup holder.
Thought Wile E. Coyote just broke into your house. Acme bombs.
That's what I get for name dropping Haruki Murakami in this show. Stop being a fucking nerd.
You
the other thing I wanted to mention quick was the weird feeling that this person has running past the Spectre from this story, because it reminds me of the stories I've read about people with the angel hair.
Yep.
Sort of like a gossamer filament. And I know there are spiders that kind of abseil around using filaments. So like explains a lot of it.
It's called ballooning.
Ballooning. There we go. Thank you. Yeah, it really ruined my day when I found out that existed.
All spiders can do that.
Well, okay.
Did you see that new funnel web they've discovered in Australia?
No.
They found a supersized one.
Oh, of course they fucking did.
And obviously it's far more venomous.
Sure, yeah. No.
I think it's 9 centimeters. But this is the thing about Australia. You know, everybody got, yes, it's full of lots of very dangerous animals. But I think it's something ridiculous like it's just a handful of people that have died of spider bites in Australia in something like the last 40 years. It's like a tiny amount of people, considering the amount of venomous spiders wandering around.
Okay, but riddle me this, Bestel man. How many people wished they'd died instead of having to live with the memory of a spider crawling all over and biting them?
I don't know. I mean, the only time I've ever been frightened is when I came home from holiday in Greece and discovered a false widow sat in my bath.
That would do it.
Because obviously, technically here we don't have any venomous spiders, even though there have been black widows found living in the wild in the UK. I think some were found under a paving slab in Manchester once. But the false widow basically arrived here about 115 years on the south coast in a foreign shipment from Europe, I think. And it's kind of sort of settled all across the south coast, but it's slowly made its way up due to climate change, because it's got considerably milder up north than it was 100 and odd years ago. And so to come home from holiday and find one of these fuckers sat in my bath. And so I managed to do the toilet paper cup trick, and I managed to take it outside. And then when I put it outside, I thought, I'll read about them. And I was like, and it just said, whatever you do, do not try and pick them up. Well, it's too fucking late now. I've done it. It's gone.
Now he knows your scent and he's coming back for more.
But I was thinking it's in the bath. So where's it come from? Because the plug from the bath goes straight into the drains. It's not got a grate on it. So did it come up the sink and then go for a wander? What? Wait, has it just been hanging around?
It's not an encouraging thought.
Yeah. I remember when I first moved to Sheffield, the first place I lived in, I was been there about 3 weeks, and there was this massive spider that lived in the front room. And nobody believed me. They all thought I was making it up because I was stoned, right? And then one night there was about 3 or 4 of us all sat around playing on his Mega Drive, being cool. And it came out, and I went, there it is. And I went to point at it, and it literally jumped up about 10 inches off floor, and just went boing, and I went, fucking hell, and fell over backwards. And then it just scuttled off again. Called it Bert.
Short for Bert eating spider. So before we get to our last story, we have one more little folklore diversion. And Paul and I were talking off air about our mouse stories. And his was, perhaps not surprisingly, far more frightening than mine. And I mention this because the folklore story that I'm going to be sharing here from Poland is also a mouse story. It is, in fact, about a man who's eaten by mice. And it appears to actually this is a common thing in that part of the world, because there are at least 2 stories, it seems, along those lines. So I'll tell you the first. The first is about Duke Popiel, and he was apparently the 9th century ruler of, this was of course before Poland. This was, according to Wikipedia, Proto-Polish tribes. I'm not going to get into the details because you don't fucking care, and neither do I. But Duke Popiel ruled over this area before Poland was Poland. And as the legend goes, he was a real piece of shit. He was well, probably what I would be if I was rich and powerful, which is he was into wine, women, and song. Like
most European rulers till about 1907.
Yeah. And like the oligarchs running things now. So, full circle.
I
don't know. The technocrat guys, I don't think they actually enjoy anything.
No, they seem to have no joy in the world.
I tell you, Paul, all we need to do, we need to hire a bunch of older guys to just go down to Silicon Valley and walk around saying, son, I'm proud of you. That whole movement will crumble. The technocracy will crumble.
You made an old man very happy.
Oh, Dad, I don't have to poison the world anymore.
And they're just airplanes, son. There's no such thing as chemtrails.
That's right.
Chemtrails. I've nicked that from Adam Curry's No Agenda podcast.
Oh, okay.
They just randomly stick that in when they're talking about something batshit. They'll just go, chemtrails.
Oh, we got to get us some of those. I mean, I had one, but it was an actual person, and I had to stop. All right, back to Duke Popeil. So, like I said, Duke Popeil sucked, and he was much like was it Helen Reddy, the Unready, or whatever?
Ethelred. Not Helen
Ethelred.
Reddy, she was a singer.
That's what I thought. Something like that. Anyways, like Helen Reddy, the king, Ethelred, the Unready, or much like, rather, Ethelred, the Unready, Popeil was really bad at his job. The Vikings whooped their ass, and his uncles conspired to depose him. Now, apparently, according to again Wikipedia, his wife said, "Hey, buddy, I got a great idea. These guys are going to try and depose you. Why don't we just kill them?" And really, hey, ironclad plan. You can't scheme against you if they're dead. So they poisoned them, and they were cast into Lake Goplo, the corpses. And apparently, the commoners were not real keen on this. Like, you really kind of suck at your job. We were sort of on the side of regicide here. And so they rebelled. And the story goes that the couple, they took refuge in a tower near the lake. And as the story goes, mice and rats, which had supposedly been feeding on the unburnt bodies of his uncles, I guess. I don't know if you need to add that detail in there, but I didn't write it. They rushed into the tower, chewing through the walls and eating him and his wife alive. And so there's actually a tower on the shore of Lake Goplo that's called the Mouse Tower. It's a medieval tower, but it's not in any way related to the actual events because, well, one, who knows what actually happened, and two, it was built in, as I say, the medieval age, so 500 years after the fact. But apparently there is another Mouse Tower outside of Bingen am Rhein in Germany, and it was built by the Romans and then restored in 968 by Hatto II. And so apparently the famine was so bad in 974 that Hatto thought, okay, well, you know what I got to do with all this grain hidden in my barn that really would feed all these people who are starving out there? I need to sell it for the highest possible price because I am the world's biggest prick. Which I'm sure won't sound familiar to anyone listening to this podcast who just paid 45% more rent than they did last year.
Capitalism. Chemtrails.
So yeah, the peasants, they reacted poorly to this, as we should as well. And Hatto came up with a plan. And his plan was to feed the hungry. So say, hey boys, come here into the barn. We got lots of food. All you poor folks, get your knobby asses in here. Let's have us a big old feed. And then once the poor people were in there, he had his servants lock the barn and set the fucker on fire.
Vlad Tepes did that as well.
I was going to say, yeah. I wrote a story for Fear Daily based off the Vlad Tepes version of the story.
Yes, seems to be the cure-all of medieval despots.
I tell you though, you only get away with that shit once.
I ain't going to your house for that party. I know what goes on in that barn.
Yeah, you better have the follow through planned if you're going to pull that shit, because otherwise they're coming for your head, Buster. But apparently Hatto, after his job done, he returned to his castle and was immediately besieged by an army of mice. And of course, according to the legends, he fled the swarm. He took a boat across the river to his tower, hoping the mice could not swim. They followed, pouring into the river in their thousands. And many of them drowned, but even more reached the island, where they ate through the tower's doors, crawled to the top floor, and ate Hatto alive. Much like, actually, the George C. Scott segment from Creepshow.
Yes, or Ray Milland being licked to death by frogs.
I think we can credit that to acid more than anything. Frogs. I wouldn't even say licked to death, hopped over to death.
I think it's one of those things we forget sometimes, that you would have these situations in ye olden days where essentially they would have plagues of mice and rats. There's so many stories of terrible things happening due to being swamped by mice and rats all over the place. I mean, the most famous example of this is obviously the Pied Piper of Hamelin.
Of course.
And that ended well for everybody, didn't it?
You know, Paul, I don't know much about folklore, but even I know that ended just fine. He played the Whistler by fuck, what's it called? The joke just died.
Jethro Tull.
Thank you.
The eyes. At 4 a.m. this morning, we got back from our walk. We live in Poland, pretty much on the Czech border, and usually take a late night walk. Around 2 a.m, we took our off-road vehicle into a nearby forest that we've been in many times. We parked the car and walked across a bridge to a spot we visited in the daytime, because there's 2 separate sides of this forest. As we walked deeper into the woods, surrounding us are mounds, which I think are old war trenches based on the area's history and the items we found around them before. The ground is full of dead leaves, so you could hear any movement, especially tonight as the woods were completely silent. All of the grassy plants and shrubs on the ground looked like they'd been recently crushed rather than cut down, and all seemed to be facing the same direction. It was almost as if a herd of buffalo had come across the tops of the mounds, run down and trampled across them. I presume that it was deer that had done this rather than buffalo, but as we were walking closer to the mounds to venture upwards, all of a sudden we hear this heavy thud on the ground, like an enormous weight landing approximately 5 meters behind us, which was closer to the mounds. We didn't see anything or hear any other movement. We decided this was our cue to leave the area, and the bridge we'd crossed was about 20 meters away. I was trying to move away quickly, with my partner clapping and shouting in case it was a wild boar. When we got to the bridge, and were still on the same side before crossing back towards our vehicle, we both stopped and shone our flashlights at the forest behind us to see if there was something there, but we didn't see or hear anything. A few seconds later we began to cross the bridge with our flashlights still pointing at the forest, but now a bush, which was about 3 meters away, were 2 sets of round yellow eyes staring back at us. The first set of eyes was about 1.5 meters to 2 meters from the ground, and the other set was about 1 meter from the ground. Even though we just shined our flashlights in that exact spot, and we were still in earshot of this bush, we didn't hear anything moving in there. As I said earlier, you couldn't take a step without the leaves going crunch crunch underfoot. The only time we'd heard a sound was that initial thud. So how did this thing move across so quickly into this bush without making any noise? We walked the rest of the bridge backwards, shining the lights at the bush, and the whole time these eyes were watching us. We jumped in that vehicle and got the fuck out of there, and luckily it didn't follow us. Whatever this was stopped, stared and stayed behind the bush on the other side of the bridge all along. I can't tell you if it was after us, or it was just making sure we'd left its side of the forest. Initially I thought this was a wild boar, but I've seen them many times in my life, even at night, and these eyes didn't look the same. I don't know how else to explain it, and there's no other large creatures like that in the area. We'll go back tomorrow at day to see if there's any animal prints near that bush to try and explain what was behind these mysterious eyes.
I'll say this is the one scenario where I will find it acceptable to have that flashlight that can crash planes.
I don't know what's in that bush, but I'm going to bring a plane down on it.
That's exactly it.
Fuck you!
It's my special ability. Summon plane. Just 9/11 the shit out of whatever's in those trees. There's a phrase I never thought I'd use on this show.
Well, it takes all sorts.
That's right. Looking forward to my tearful apology next episode.
When you've been cancelled.
Yeah. So what do you think about that one? I mean, do you think that sounds cryptidy, or do you think that's just like a wild boar? I feel like wild boars make more noise.
Yeah, I'll tell you what I think it is. And here's me trying to be balanced. Why couldn't it have been a pair of owls?
Oh, okay. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
Because the thing is, people go, oh, well, it's 2 meters up. Well, it might be an owl sat on a bush, sat on a branch.
Yeah.
Just having a look, keeping an eye on him. Especially as it keeps staring, because owls are weird like that, aren't they? They've got very big eyes, obviously, because they're a predator. Did I tell you about this the other week? That obviously we've got a few owls around where I live, and the other week I was outside late at night, probably around midnight, and I was on the balcony at the back. I think Theo had gone for a wee, And so I love to listen for the owl hooting. He always brings a smile to my face. I don't know why. And then I saw it, and it flew over my head, probably about 6 foot over my head, and it didn't make a sound. Nothing.
Oh.
It was completely silent. It just glided above me and then settled on a TV aerial about 3 or 4 houses down. And it's a big one. It's not like a small one. It's a fairly large owl, I'd say. And so I think sometimes people presume animals make noise, but I've seen an owl fly over my head completely silently, and if I hadn't seen it, I wouldn't have known it was there.
That's incredible. Man, he could have staircased you and you wouldn't have ever seen it coming.
Absolutely. And I've seen the talons on an owl. I'm not having that round my barnet. Thank you very much.
Yeah, they are fierce creatures.
Yeah, well, I took my mum. It was my mum's 70th last year. And we've got a Harry Potter themed bar here in Sheffield, as you do, obviously.
Naturally.
And I took her. They do an indoor owl display.
Yeah, I remember you telling me about this.
And so seeing them so close, just gliding silently around. I mean, they only make a noise when they're hungry. So they were squeaking when the handler was like giving them a bit of meat and stuff. But they were the same. They were just just nothing. And they've got enormous eyes. I've literally been, I don't know, a foot away from an owl sat on my table with its big, beautiful eyes just looking at me, going, who's this weird bald thing? So, I mean, that doesn't explain the initial noise of the gigantic thud that they heard. But I think just because two things happen at the same time doesn't mean they're connected.
Yeah. Well, if I was just thinking about, I mentioned on last episode, I started reading Danny Robbins' Into the Uncanny. And he mentions the story about the woman with the sticks. Every morning she woke up in her cabin and there was a fire ready for her to light. And, all the sticks were like neatly in the fireplace. And it just turned out there was a family of, I can't remember what it was. It was a family of something in the chimney. And it was just accidentally dropping sticks down there.
Yeah, birds making a nest.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So, there can be like completely unexpected mundane explanations for these things.
See, that's one thing I don't miss about growing up, is birds falling down your chimney and shitting everybody in the house up.
I think this might be an experience unique to yourself, my friend, because this was not part of my life.
Was it a pigeon fell down at my granddad's? Pigeon fell down chimney and just flew about, spraying soot everywhere and shitting.
Oh,
brilliant.
No.
Chasing it around the house, crapping on everything. Brilliant. Great laugh.
I have these pigeons that roost sometimes outside my window or on my balcony here, and I quite like them because my old apartment didn't have a balcony. But and considered, maybe I should feed them. And I thought, no, don't do that, because you're just going to have 100 pigeons shitting everywhere and making noise, and it's going to drive you goddamn crazy.
Yeah, and you'll end up like Brenda Blethyn in Home Alone 2.
In the same movie as Donald Trump. Boom.
Yes. And the world's worst parents.
Yeah, no, that's not fair to my mom. That was going to be a good joke, but just kidding, Mom. I love you.
Release the trauma.
I think this podcast could just be called that.
International Trauma Solutions.
Well, telling you, if we ever incorporate, that'll be the name we choose.
Yes. Or Chemtrails Anonymous.
All right, folks. On that completely unfocused note, this has been our Haunting of Poland show. We hope you've enjoyed our exploration of some of the folklore around the country of Poland, around some of its ghost stories. And if you have a story, send it to ghoststoryguys@gmail.com. We're preparing another Listener Stories episode very soon. We would love to have your stories in there. Again, that's ghoststoryguys@gmail.com. We would love to read your stories. Now we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Hey there, listeners. Before you reach for that skip 15 seconds ahead button, I promise you this isn't an ad. We wanted to take a minute to talk to you about mental health. On this show, I've always tried to be as honest and open as possible about my struggles with depression and anxiety, because even though we've come a long way towards acknowledging the very real damage these things can do, there is still way too much lingering stigma about reaching out for help. And when you start to feel like there's no help, it's easy to start feeling like there's no hope. But Paul has joined me today to remind you there is always hope and there's always help.
We're not going to try and talk you out of self-harming right now, because we know that's not how it works. Instead, what we wanted to do was tell you something now and hope that should things get bad, you'll remember it and make a phone call or send a text message before you make any permanent decisions. As someone who knows all too well just how important mental health can be, it's never too late to reach out.
In Canada, the number to call is 133-456-4566. In the USA, the new number to call is 988. That's 988.
In the UK, the number to call is 116123, or text SHOUT, that's SHOUT, to 85258. In Australia, the number to call is 131114.
However bad shit seems, it will pass. And no matter what your brain might be telling you at any given moment, and believe me when I say I know this intimately, there are people who love you and people who care deeply about how you treat yourself. Should a time come when you find yourself despairing, please know that we've both been where you are, and there is a way back to the world. Take care. Welcome back. The Ghost Story Guys are Luke Greensmith, who helps us find our stories. He's also host of the Luke Lore podcast, available everywhere fine podcasts live. Tanya Downing, who manages our Facebook community. Sarah Kent, who manages our Reddit community.
Our paranormal conductor is Mr. Brennan Storr, leading the good ship Ghost Story Guys through the paranormal sparadma.
I don't know what that word means, but that was very impressive.
I don't. I've just made it up.
Okay, there we go. All through the sparadma.
That's the new buzz term for 2025.
Okay. And my ever erudite friend, co-host, is the one and only, the inimitable Paul Bestel, the paranormal Johnny Carson himself, host of Mysteries and Monsters. Paul, what's coming up on M&M?
I'm joined by the marvellous UFO researcher, Mr. Graham Rendell, as we dive in to some of the strange occurrences of Foo Fighters from the Second World War that seem to plague both the Allies and the Axis nations during the conflicts across the world.
Fantastic. And where can everyone find you online?
You can find Mysteries and Monsters on all podcast sites and most social media networks.
Fabulous. I'm Largely the Truth on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Letterboxd. And you can find my daily horror fiction show, Fear Daily, everywhere fine podcasts live. As we said at the top of the show, patrons, Apple Podcast, and YouTube subscribers are the lifeblood of the Ghost Story Guys. You are truly the ones who allow us to do this, and for that we are deeply, deeply grateful. And if you would like to contribute to the show, help us out, join our community of super cool people, head to patreon.com/ghoststoryguys. That's patreon.com/ghoststoryguys. Click the link in the show notes or sign up to Ghost Story Guys Premium via Apple Podcasts. You get not only bonus conversations between me and Paul, you get episodes of Host Adventures, our monthly live stream, the Ghost Force shoutouts, and so much more. And of course, you get an ad-free feed. Who doesn't want that? Ads suck. And again, find more about that by clicking the link in the show notes or by going to patreon.com/ghoststoryguys or signing up to Ghost Story Guys Premium via Apple Podcasts. Paul, my friend, do you have any guest spots coming up?
Yes, I've been invited to join Canadian researcher Jason Hewlett on his new paranormal podcast where we ponder the possibilities of what the hell is going on around the world. And so I'll be recording that in the next couple of weeks. And once it's released, I shall update everybody accordingly.
Fabulous. And you were, of course, on the season opener of Supernatural Circumstances, talking about the Runcorn poltergeist?
Yes. The story that helped me recover, and I would imagine is essentially one of the reasons why Mysteries and Monsters is here today.
Very cool. Well, again, you'll find links to that in the blog at ghoststoryguys.com. We link to all of our guest spots there. And keep an eye on our social media for new spots when they drop. If you want to pick up some Ghost Story Guys merch, we have t-shirts, mugs, stickers, all kinds of cool stuff. Some of those designs include our episode covers, which are, of course, custom for each show. And some of them are just Paul dressed like Thor, because I thought that seemed like a good idea, and I was right.
Soon we will be launching our chemtrails t-shirts.
That's right. I don't know. Are we going to get sued for that one?
I don't know.
Our theme song, Radio, Into the Darkness We Go, is composed and performed by Peter Kursov of Pizzanta Music. Find more from him by searching for Pizzanta Music wherever you get your tunes. And I guess that's going to do it.
We'll be back next week, but until then...
Into the darkness we go. Money. They smell money.
Well, whether we want to or not, we still have to pay them £150 a fucking year, so it don't matter, does it? Bastards.
You give someone a cell phone they can fuck, they'll never see the sun again. Not going to leave that in. That one's just for Paul. I'd believe it, the son of a bitch. I'm going to cut that out because I don't want to encourage people. But okay, I regret saying that now because this is all starting to sound very suggestive.
Chemtrails.
He doesn't respect
He's
you.
a weirdo.
God damn it. Keep dropping my headphones. I keep throwing my head back to laugh and they fall off.